All right, now that we have talked about factoring, let's talk about solving. But before we solve, I want you to think about a couple of things. Look at this list of multiplication. 2 times 0, 3 times 0, 4 times 0, 0 times 3, 0 times 2. I'm sure that you've noticed by now that all of these equals 0. And that's because anything times 0 is equal to 0. It doesn't matter whether 0 comes first or if it comes last. But as long as there is a 0 in a multiplication, the answer is going to be 0. So we're going to use that to help us solve. That's why when we say x times y is equal to 0, right? Two numbers multiplied by each other is equal to 0. We know that x equals to 0 or y can equal to 0, right? When both of those things happen, the answer will always be 0. So using that idea, we're going to take a look at the bottom half of our notes, solving quadratics by factoring. Since we know that we want to have two numbers multiplied to each other to equal to 0, we want to make sure the very, very first step is to set the equation equals to 0. Always set the equation equals to 0. So let's take a look at the second equation, the second example first before we do some practice on our first example. In this case, you have 2x squared minus 7x equals to negative 5. Notice it's not equal to 0, so we need to make it equal to 0. In order to do that, we have to add 5 on both sides. That is going to give me 2x squared minus 7x plus 5. Now it's equal to 0. At this point, I am going to factor it, just like what I did before. So step 2, factor. In this case, we're going to do the X box to factor. Okay, so let's take a look. 2, 7, and 5. There is no greatest common factor in this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right into the X and I'm going to fill out the box. I know that for the box, the first term is going to be 2x squared for that very, very first box. The last number is going to go into the last box, so positive 5. I know I need to add the diagonal to equals it to negative 7x. But what are those numbers? That's what I'm using the x for. A times c goes on top, so a is 2, c is 5, so 2 times 5 is 10. The b goes on the bottom, b is negative 7. So I need to find two numbers. Something times something equals to positive 10, and when I add these two numbers, it needs to equal to negative 7. I could list out all of the factors of 10. I know that negative 2 times negative 5 is going to give me positive 10, and when I add negative 2 and negative 5, it's going to give me negative 7. So those two numbers are going to go in here, negative 2x and negative 5x. Now I'm going to find the greatest common factor between 2x squared and negative 2x and pull it out to the side. 2 and 2, 2 goes into both of that. X squared and x has the greatest common factor of x. Using that, let's multiply to figure out the rest of the factor. 2x times blank equals to 2x squared, that's 1x. 2x times blank equals to negative 2x, that's negative 1. X times blank equals to negative 5x, that's negative 5. So what I end up having is this. X minus 1 times 2x minus 5 is equal to 0. Going back to what we talked about earlier, when I say, hey, when I have two numbers multiplied together to equal to 0, one or both of the number can be equal to 0. So in this case, if I have, this is number x, this is the first number, x minus 1. This is the second number, at 2x minus 5. If they multiply to equal to 0, I know that x minus 1 has to equal to 0, or 2x minus 5 has to equal to 0. Now that I have two equations, I can solve each one of them to figure out what x is. Add 1 on both sides, so I know that x can equal to 1. This one's a little trickier, a little bit more involved. You need to add 5 on both sides. 2x equals to 5. To figure out what x is, I have to divide it by 2. So that tells me x is equal to 5 over 2. And you're more than welcome to just keep it as a fraction. You don't need to rewrite it as a decimal. So you have two answers, x equals to 1 and x equals to 5 over 2 for this equation right here, 2x squared minus 7x equals to negative 5. You can always check your answer by taking your x value, plugging it back in, work it out to see if it equals to negative 5.